Um, when I think of mental health, I think of 1,000 different things. And I think originally it used to have quite a singular meaning that, people are crazy. They should be locked away or something. But I think in time it's taken on so many different kinds of meanings. And now, when you hear mental health, to me anyway, I think of something not so extreme, something that could be very silent, something that could not be easily noticed, something that could slip away without really being able to see it or catch it. And to me, through time, I think people are learning more about it, and all the different kind of subtle ways it could occur, but we don't know how to deal with the people who are silent.
When I hear the term mental health, what comes to mind is like depression and sadness, or like asylums or stuff, like craziness, if you know what I mean.
When the word mental health hits me, initially what I would have thought in the past was someone that's crazy, someone that's insane, and they don't have the capacity to control their mentality. But over the years, that's sort of changed, and I've come up with this idea. It really hit me, this idea that mental health is something that everyone has. You know, whether it's a kid, whether it's an adult, whether it's a woman, man, old, young, we all have mental health to a certain degree. It's how we process the world, how we see the world, and how we translate the world, digest it, and what decisions we make. But what I do know is that mental health there's a certain point where mental health goes extreme, and that's when people do not have that ability, or they've lost that ability to control and digest situations and circumstances and to process the world mentally because of their traumas, because of their experiences and things that they've went through that they have not been able to deal with, or they haven't had the support or the assistance to cope with that.
When I hear the term mental health, obviously the key stigmas around mental health come to mind. They are the most relevant disorders in this day and age, which is depression and anxiety, which is what a lot of people associate with mental health more than anything else. But for me, mental health is literally your well-being, your state of well-being, your state of mind, and how you approach situations based on your own mentality.
When I hear the term mental health, in my head a spectrum comes up. So I feel like there's healthy mental health and unhealthy mental health.
When I hear the term mental health, I think more in terms of mental well-being. Being in a healthy state of mind.
Mental health is I don't really know how to answer that. Mental health is basically how you are feeling. It's like how you're feeling with, like, it's like the body health. It's like how you're feeling with your how your body is feeling, if you're feeling ill or if you're feeling healthy. And mental health is something like that, but in terms of the mind. If your mind is feeling healthy, like if you're happy, if you're sad, if you're feeling any other emotion, and why, I guess, mentality. This is how I connect it with, based on terms of languages.
When I hear mental health, I think of someone whose mental state is not healthy. someone who's probably showing a lot of unhealthy stuff in their life, like the way they think. They probably think negatively. They probably don't care for themselves. They probably are in a state of depression, or someone who's not there.
To me, depression could be when you're feeling sad and low, but to some people it's extremely medical, and it's people who have to take medication for it, and it's so much more of a almost not a disability, but people view it in the same way as you have no control over yourself when you have depression.
The term depression, I feel like people say it as a throwaway comment and they don't actually know what depression means. Like, they'll come in and say, oh, I'm depressed today, whereas they don't know that depression is a real thing and people actually go through it.
As I said before, depression is what I mostly associate with mental health. And for me, depression, the most direct meaning for me, depression is a state of perpetual sadness, an ongoing sadness that you can't quite shake off, even knowing, as someone that's dealt with depression and still does, even knowing that you can't necessarily put your finger on a reason why you feel sad. You just know in yourself that you are.
What I think depression is, from my understanding, is when you're constantly sad. When you, everything you feel positive is, there's nothing positive in your life. You don't look for a good aspects, it's only the negative.
I think it's very healthy to acknowledge when you're feeling down, just in the same way that you would acknowledge if you had a cold or if you weren't feeling well, you would acknowledge that. So why not acknowledge when mentally you're not feeling too great?
I think it's really, really, really important that everyone, particularly men, express their feelings and emotions. You know, again, going back to what I've said before, and this is what causes, this is what I believe causes depression, this is what I believe causes anxiety, is that this idea, this rules that we live by, these expectations we live by others, that men are not allowed to express their feelings, these people are not allowed to do that, women are not allowed to do that, and we actually play by this. And when we play by this, we just overwhelm ourselves, we frustrate ourselves, we are not living in our authenticity. We are not living true and real to us, and that makes us feel worthless. It makes us feel insignificant. It makes us feel that we are not good enough. I think when you express how you feel, it can be challenging, but it can be the most powerful and liberating thing that you can do. Because then what can also happen is people can pour in their support for you.
Yeah, it's definitely healthy to acknowledge when you're feeling down, because you would acknowledge when you're feeling happy. I mean, there's nothing bad about feeling down. There's nothing bad about having negative feelings per se. Like, you have to acknowledge all of your emotions, because this is how you feel overall.
I think there are a number of different triggers that will enable somebody to feel happiness or sadness. I think a sense of normality, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of need, a sense of love brings about feelings of happiness. And I think fear and lack of, whether that be lack of money, lack of love, lack of security, bring about sadness for young people and adults too.
I would say the triggers that bring sadness for me are like people that are not well, that people are like that are unwell, people that are going through something traumatic that's around me. Definitely the weather, when it's cold, when it's freezing outside, that literally triggers my heart.
For me, happiness and depression, I think of it in a more scientific way when it comes to the triggers. Now, obviously, the trigger of happiness is a release of endorphins and dopamine to the brain that gives you that feeling of happiness. Now, once you recognize that scientific side of it, you can think of it in a new way. So when you are depressed, you find things that make you happy. Now, for me, what makes me happy, what releases those pleasure hormones, the dopamine, these endorphins, is going to the gym, keeping fit, which has been scientifically proven to release those chemicals in the brain, and in turn that causes me to be happy at the end of it. It gives me that feeling of happiness.
Anxiety, the first thing that comes to my head is nervousness, extreme nervousness, and I could relate to some extent to that. But I think a lot like depression, or whatever that is, anxiety is a lot like that too, because it could cover a lot of ground. It could have so many different meanings, or it could be coming from so many different places that it's hard to really put a finger on it, you know.
What anxiety means, and based on what I said from earlier on, what anxiety means to me is when we think about too much in the future. It's what creates anxiety, but not just what we think about the future. It's when what we've been fed starts to join together with what it is that we are anxious about our future. For example, when I was younger, I was always told that I would never be successful, that I would never be good enough. And so every single day, the way I used to think was, will I ever be good enough in the future? Will I ever be able to have this job? Will I ever be able to have the relationship of my life? Would I be able to have the career of my life? And so what you do as a result, what creates the anxiety is you're not living in the future, nor are you living in the present. And it just creates this sense of, again, fear. It creates this sense of, you know you can play out more, you know you can be more, but you are not being more. You're not playing, you're not living life to your real blueprint. You're just living in other people's opinions and beliefs and what they've said your future is going to look like for you. This is what creates anxiety, and it creates fear and doubt.
Anxiety is I will give you an example. When you go out, when you lock the door, and when you've locked all doors in the house, but you come back and you feel like you haven't locked any of them, and you can't walk out of the house, so you just go around and you're just like, have I done this? Have I locked this? No, I haven't. And even though in your head you know you have, and you know you're gonna be late for that appointment, but you still can't leave. That's anxiety.
So, some of the changes I see with people who are suffering from mental health issues, the biggest indicator for me is social isolation. So that person becomes more and more isolated and kind of removes themselves from wider society and sometimes even their family. And often what happens then is that person or persons, they will self-medicate, and usually that's some form of a mind-altering substance, so some form of drug, mainly marijuana, but oftentimes it could be prescription drugs or anything that is going to stop them from feeling how they feel prior to taking to the drug. Other things that I've seen people do in order to help with their mental health is what I consider quite positive things like yoga, meditation, exercise. Exercise is a brilliant one to help change the mindset. Eating differently, just making some type of change to their lives in order to change their mindset.
I would say if people have issues that are so extreme, it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking. You have these fears that people won't understand, they won't take it seriously. So then you just clam up again and you don't say anything. Then some people don't say anything at all, and it just grows and keeps growing, and it gets worse, which is the unhealthy part. But I could understand where it comes from, because I think it comes from fear. Fear of being viewed differently as well.
Hello, my name's Alan Eno, consultant psychotherapist at 46 Harley Street, London. I'm going to be talking to you about mental health, generally what is mental health, and then go on to talk about depression disorders, anxiety disorders, and how it impacts the mind-body system. I want to initially start with mental health just to kind of demystify or to clarify what mental health is. Mental health can affect you in different ways. It can affect you in terms of your mentally, how you're feeling. It could affect you socially. It can affect you in terms of your relationship with people. Generally, it's known as a psychosocial problem, meaning that it affects you psychologically and mentally. And mental health can range from mild, moderate, or severe, depending on the type of disorder that you may have. So generally speaking, if anyone's concerned about mental health, I would urge you to initially consult your GP, or you can see a specialist. You can go to, there are different professional bodies. The abbreviation is the BACP, which is known for the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, or the UKCP, the United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy. Both bodies are specialists in terms of dealing with mental health, depression, and anxiety disorders. I just wanted to say a bit more about depression and anxiety, what it is exactly, how it impacts the mind-body system, what are the various symptoms or feelings, and if you do have any concerns, you can, as I've mentioned previously, you can contact either your GP or those two professional bodies. Depression itself, you can experience depression. It could be mild, moderate, or severe. In terms of its characteristics, I'm going to talk to you about how it can affect you emotionally or psychologically. People that present with depression quite often feel sad. They may experience low mood. Sometimes they may feel suicidal. It can affect generally how you relate to people. You may experience a loss of interest in things that you used to do and enjoy. You may find yourself withdrawing from people that you was in contact with. It can also affect your sleep. It can affect your appetite and your energy levels. People presenting with depression quite often feel exhausted, fatigued, and have no motivation. So if you experience any of those type of feelings or symptoms, I'd recommend that you consult your GP in the first instance, or you can contact the two professional bodies, the BACP or the UKCP. I'm going to talk about anxiety. Anxiety can correlate with depression, but I'll talk about anxiety separately and then how they may affect one another. People that present with anxiety may generally feel worried or anxious now about the future and what may happen. Some of the feelings of anxiety is a feeling of dread. Something bad is going to happen to you. And if this increases in terms of how you feel, you may find yourself experiencing physical symptoms. Your heart rate increasing. You may have headaches, something known as panic attacks where you're hyperventilating. You'll notice generally that you either want to avoid people or experiences, which is another form of anxiety. Anxiety symptoms can also affect your appetite, your general mood. The two often can correlate with each other, and an anxiety disorder or episode can trigger depression. And depression can also contribute and trigger an anxiety disorder. So for the layperson, it might be difficult to distinguish the difference between the two, because the symptoms and the feelings quite often overlap, but they are very much quite different. But nonetheless, to say that you can experience depression without anxiety and anxiety without depression. If you do have any concerns about any of the conditions that I've mentioned, please contact your GP or contact a professional body, the BACP or the UKCP. That's the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy and United Kingdom Council for Psychotherapy. They're both specialist bodies that can help.